Gaius Julius Caesar, and the assassination that changed the course of Western civilization forever. During the ancient Roman Empire, many men wrote their names into history, but one name still resonates. Century after century, Gaius Julius Caesar, 2,000 years after his assassination, he is still revered as one of the greatest rulers in all of history. Throughout more than 2 millennia, the name of Caesar has been a symbol of power, greatness, and conquest. Envied by numerous leaders, kings, and emperors around the world, rulers who have taken the name of Caesar, Kaiser, or Tsar, styling themselves in his image. His military genius and political skill saw him rise to the position of dictator for life. His ambition would drive him to unprecedented power, but it would also prove to be his downfall. Join us to explore the life and achievements of the man behind the myth, one of the most complex people in all of human history, Gaius Julius Caesar. Before we move forward, I want to remind you that we have a playlist on our channel where you can follow every episode of our Origin series in chronological order, covering everything about the history of humanity. Do not miss them. I also invite you to check out our English channel. And please do not forget to subscribe to the channel, leave us a like, and share the content so you can help our work reach many more people. Thank you. On March 15th of the year, 44 BC, the most powerful man in the world lay lifeless on the floor of the Roman Senate, Gaius Julius Caesar, after being declared, at 55 years old, as the first dictator for life of Rome. He was the victim of the most famous assassination in history, which determined the course of Western civilization. In a frantic attack, 23 stab wounds were inflicted on him by the same number of assassins. This murder occurred more than 2,000 years ago, but we still remember the exact date it happened. The story of Caesar was a story of violence, intrigue, and power. The story of one man who risked everything for glory. To his people, he was a hero. To his enemies, a tyrant. To many, a truly superhuman figure, a brilliant general, a great writer, and a man of the people. To others, a genocidal psychopath. As a general, he almost doubled the size of the Roman Empire. As a politician, he engineered an astonishing rise to power. Gaius Julius Caesar forever altered the political landscape of Rome. His death would embody both the potential and the danger of absolute power. His consolidation of power marked the death of the Republic and would give rise in Rome to a political system in which tyrannical emperors would rule with absolute authority. Caesar was never called Emperor of Rome, but in a way, he was the first. He took all the powers that emperors would hold for the next hundreds of years. But his impact has lasted much longer than that of ancient Rome. But this story, which embarks us on an epic journey through the conquests of Julius Caesar, from ancient Egypt to the island of Great Britain, changing the map of Europe in the process, and transforming Rome itself into an empire, begins 66 years earlier. In the year 100 BC, in the middle of summer, on July 13th, a young noblewoman named Aurelia gave birth to her first son. The boy was named Gaius, followed by the clan name Julius, and the family name Caesar. He was born in the city of Subura, a city plagued by crime and filth. But Caesar was not exactly one of the street children who roamed the slums. The aristocratic Caesars had their roots among the founding fathers of Rome. Caesar was born into a patrician family of the gens Julia, a lineage situated among the most aristocratic in Rome. He always emphasized the ancient nobility of his family, claiming descent from the first king on his mother's side, and from the gods on his father's side. Caesar had a difficult childhood with a very strict mother, and he was molded into a pattern of greatness, indoctrinated with the idea that his role in life was to pursue the highest political ambitions and to continue elevating his family name. This privileged upbringing instilled in Caesar a sense of pride for Rome's past, for its legendary founding on the banks of the Tiber River in the year 753 BC, for the creation of the Republic, and for the expansion of Rome throughout Italy, North Africa, Greece, southern Gaul, and Spain. Rome was governed by patrician families like that of the young Caesar, who would soon be prepared to follow in the footsteps of his father, his namesake. His father had been a senator of praetorian rank, but later stepped away from politics after a provincial governorship in Asia. His mother Aurelia was a member of the Aurelii Cottae, a prominent family of the plebeian nobility. Several members of this family dominated Roman politics at the end of the 2nd century BC, and it was this relationship that Caesar would later leverage in his early political career. The most decisive would be the relationship with Gaius Marius, husband of his paternal aunt, who was the leader of the political movement of the Populares faction, which would mean a notable help for Caesar's future political progression. We do not know much about Caesar's childhood, but his education included the study of the Greek language, and he read the works of Greek historians. In his teenage years, he began attending lectures on philosophy and rhetoric, showing a great interest in developing his skills as a public speaker, which at that time was a prized skill in Rome. The Roman Forum was the center of intellectual discussion and debate. During his youth, physical training was valued as much as education. He learned at this stage of his life the skills that he would one day use in battle. At the age of 15, Caesar was introduced to political life wearing the toga, the distinctive attire of a Roman citizen, when he accompanied his father to the Forum, the heart of Rome and its empire. This was the place from which his fellow aristocrats ran Rome like a private club. Rome's was an aristocratic system, in which aristocrats competed with each other for elections to political offices. But repeatedly, in the century before the beginning of our era, these aristocrats involved soldiers to settle political differences. Under the Republic, Rome had conquered Mediterranean wealth. This wealth was pouring in, but the very expansion of the Republic was causing political instability. At the beginning of the century, the Senate had split into warring factions. The entire Caesar family placed itself firmly on the side of Marius. Caesar's early years were marked by a Roman civil war, a war between two army commanders, the generals Gaius Marius and Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Sulla was the leader of the Optimates, the political faction that opposed the Populares, led by Marius. The Optimates sought to maintain senatorial supremacy against the populist reforms advocated by the Populares. When Caesar was 15 years old, his father died. This left him alone. He became the head of the family, and he had to work very hard to push his corrupt political career. All of this became a great stimulus for his ambition, but the power struggle in Rome would drag it into anarchy. At the age of 16, Caesar married Cornelia, daughter of Lucius Cornelius Cinna, one of the most influential politicians in Rome. Cinna was an enemy of Lucius Cornelius Sulla and a strategic ally of Gaius Marius. With Cornelia, Caesar would have his only legitimate daughter, Julia. But before he could exploit his new connections, civil war broke out again in Rome. Years later, the 17-year-old Caesar would get a terrifying taste of Roman political reality. Lucius Cornelius Sulla arrived in the year 82 BC and crushed the Populares in an unprecedented act. Defeating the Marian forces in battle, Sulla revived the office of dictator, which had been dormant since the Second Punic War more than a century earlier. He used his powers to purge his opponents and reform Roman constitutional laws, to restore the primacy of the Senate and limit the power of the tribunes of the plebs. It was a time of danger. Caesar's wealth was confiscated, and his life was threatened by the faction that had seized power. With total control of the city and its affairs, Sulla instituted a proscription, a program of execution and property confiscation for those he perceived as enemies of the state. He ordered the execution of some 1,500 nobles, senators, and equites. It was estimated that nearly 9,000 people were executed. Relatives of the proscribed were not excluded from punishment. Most of the proscribed had not been enemies of Sulla, but were killed for their property, which was confiscated and auctioned off. Young Caesar was one of those to whom Sulla turned his attention after returning to Rome. Although Caesar had taken no part in the government of Marius and Cinna, and had done nothing to oppose Sulla's return, Caesar's aunt was the wife of Marius. Marius and Cinna had appointed the young Caesar to an important priesthood. Sulla considered Caesar a potential rival. He proscribed him, which meant he was marked for execution. Seeing no other alternative, and in an attempt to get away from Rome as quickly as possible, he joined the army. He left for distant Turkey and served with great prominence. even receiving the civic crown for his heroic acts. He was quickly recognized by his superiors. A promising future for Caesar was beginning to emerge. Caesar spent 4 years on campaign in Asia Minor, earning praise for his bravery. By then, the political situation in Rome had changed. In the year 78 BC, the young Julius Caesar received the news that Cornelius Sulla had suddenly died. For Caesar, this meant a chance to return home. After fulfilling his contract in the army, the teenager who had gone to war returned as a man ready for a new but very different campaign. Initially, he began a career as a lawyer. His inheritance had been confiscated during Sulla's reign, so he and his wife lived a modest lifestyle in lower-class neighborhoods. Through his time as a legal representative, he began to develop a reputation as a powerful and passionate public speaker. Caesar had no qualms about expressing his support for the Populares faction, which had been suppressed by Sulla. Little by little, Caesar was positioning himself as the leader of the people. He was increasingly seen as the natural heir to Marius. The art of public speaking was vital for an aspiring young politician. So, in the year 73 BC, Caesar sailed east to the island of Rhodes to learn from a famous Greek master of oratory. During the sea voyage, he was captured by pirates and held hostage on an island. He offered to pay the pirates 50 talents in exchange for his release. Once the ransom was paid, they released him. But Caesar had other plans. He immediately pursued and captured the pirates and ordered them to be crucified. This event helped to increase Caesar's fame. His name was already popular in the streets of Rome. Upon his return to Rome during that same year, in 73 BC, he would witness the beginning of the Third Servile War, also called by Plutarch the War of the Gladiators. It was the last in a series of unsuccessful slave revolts against the Roman Republic, collectively known as the Servile Wars. The Third Servile War was the only one that managed to pose a serious threat to the core of Rome and to the whole of Italy. It was doubly alarming to the Roman people due to the continued successes of the growing band of rebel slaves against the Roman army between 73 and 71 BC. Originally, it was a small cadre of some 70 escaped gladiators, which grew into a band of 120,000 men, women, and children. They roamed all over Italy, raiding it with relative impunity. They were under the command of several leaders, including the famous gladiator general Spartacus. And Caesar enlisted as a junior officer in the campaign against Spartacus. Caesar joined the Roman military machine as it advanced through the country, defeating and capturing the disorganized rebels. There was absolutely no mercy for this assault on the established order. Along the Appian Way, 6,000 prisoners from Spartacus's revolt were crucified. Anyone traveling north from Naples to Rome would cover the final miles amidst the screams and the stench of the tortured and the dying. The revolt was finally crushed in 71 BC by the concentrated military operation of the commanders Pompey, Crassus, and Lucullus. The campaign against Spartacus was to be vital for Caesar's career. Caesar, like most of his contemporaries, wanted to reach the top and become consul. But Roman political life was a risky and expensive gamble. It took a lot of money to get ahead, and Caesar did not have it. Senators paid for their political campaigns out of their own pockets. But Caesar's commanding officer in the campaign against Spartacus had been Marcus Licinius Crassus, an immensely influential man and the richest in Rome. Crassus was willing to make large loans to an ambitious young man like Caesar. Caesar went into high gear, and as he climbed the political ladder, he did everything in excess. In the year 69 BC, fate would deal him a hard blow. After about 13 years of marriage, his wife Cornelia passed away. After his wife's funeral, at the age of 30, he secured a foothold on the political ladder. He was appointed as the emblem of a possession, an administrative post that involved performing financial auditing tasks in Hispania. At that time, through a combination of conquests and alliances, Rome's power extended across the current territories of Italy to North Africa, the Middle East, southern France, and most of Spain. Upon returning to Rome, Caesar's prominence and popularity saw him elected to a succession of public offices. His post in Hispania granted him automatic and lifelong entry to the Senate. In 67 BC, Pirate activity was already having notable repercussions on the exercise of Roman commercial activity, both in the transit of goods and of people. Pirate attacks threatened Roman supremacy and even the survival of the city. In this scenario, the authorities of Rome faced both the prospect of starvation among the population, as well as the probable street riots caused by it. In that same year, Caesar was key in promoting the Lex Gabinia. The Lex Gabinia plebiscite, proposed in 67 BC by the tribune of the plebs Aulus Gabinius, one of Pompey's closest friends, granted proconsular imperium powers to whoever was appointed to the position for 3 years, in all the territories of the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, with the goal of ending the pirate attacks. The plebiscite did not indicate who should be the leader of the campaign, but it was obvious that if it passed, Pompey would be named by popular acclaim, which is what happened. Pompey thus became, by the level of authority conferred, the first Roman emperor. The opposition of a large part of the Senate to this designation is well known, with Julius Caesar being one of the few in favor of that appointment. But Caesar did not do it to favor Pompey. Passing this law meant, in principle, the absence from Rome for 3 years of an important adversary who might have hindered his later activities. Furthermore, with this, he drew closer to the people, who were very supportive of Pompey. But despite his advances in politics up to that point, Caesar was still not accepted by the elite. For this reason, he adopted a bold strategy and turned to the urban poor. He campaigned in the slums of Rome. The life of the poor people of Rome was terribly dirty and short. The streets were crowded, and Rome had grown very fast, so houses were built haphazardly, and people crowded into small dwellings. The streets were dirty and packed, full of pestilence and diseases. As an outsider, Julius Caesar did what any astute politician would do. He found a different power base. He ignored the aristocracy and opted for the urban poor, prepared to do what few other aristocrats would do. He walked the streets, shaking hands with common people, and showed himself perfectly ready to serve and flatter everyone. When Caesar was put in charge of public entertainment in the city, his games were bigger and better. He had a large number of wild beasts imported from North Africa, and 320 pairs of gladiators fought to the death for the amusement of the crowd. When he had a job maintaining the Appian Way, he spent a fortune on repairs. The common people loved him for all this. He was a popular politician who did not have solid support in the Senate, so he turned to the people. The days and nights were filled with deals that were closed in the privacy of Caesar's home. The common citizens liked him for the friendly way he mingled with the people. All this made him politically increasingly important. In addition to legitimate expenses, Caesar also had to buy votes in every election. But every job of Caesar's also meant a new advance from Crassus. After having established a complex network of followers at his 36 years of age, in 63 BC, Caesar tested his public and private popularity by running for election as the supreme priest of Rome. He gambled everything to be elected, contracting very significant debts, and he succeeded. He got the position and the benefits that went with it. In the year 62 BC, when Pompey returned triumphantly to Rome, it seemed unimaginable that there could be anyone to compete with him. He was by then the greatest general of Rome, who had recently conquered Syria, Palestine, and much of the Near East. A core member of the Roman elite and the most important person of the moment, Pompey's fortune probably rivaled the wealth of the Republic itself. Cities were named in his honor. In Rome, he would build a magnificent entertainment complex that would bear his name, with a heroic colossal statue of his figure holding aloft a globe, with personifications of the 14 different countries he had conquered. Pompey had now surpassed all contemporary rivals. The only remaining possible comparisons were legends, like his own role model, Alexander the Great. But destiny wanted Julius Caesar first to equal Pompey's fame, to then eclipse it. When Pompey returned to Rome from the east, there were many among the elites who feared and expected him to take the final step of overthrowing the Republic and seizing complete power for himself. Just as Cornelius Sulla had done decades ago, it is almost certain that he could have done this. Instead, Pompey landed peacefully in Italy, disbanded his armies, and respected the conventions of the Republic. He He did not put his personal ambition above the state itself. On the other hand, Caesar was still determined to become consul and sought a political alliance to achieve it. He closed this alliance with Licinius Crassus and with Pompey. The three forged a pact to cement the deal. The first triumvirate was formed, the name given by historians to the unofficial political alliance they formed from 60 to 53 BC. Caesar gave his young daughter Julia to Pompey in marriage. Probably at this stage, they needed Caesar because he was a major threat. They had to ally with him or destroy him. Although Pompey and Caesar would eventually become bitter rivals, they began as allies. In 59 BC, after a series of political trade-offs and backroom deals, Crassus's wealth and Pompey's soldiers secured Caesar's appointment as senior consul. He was named co-consul alongside Marcus Calpurnius Bibulus, who was one of his political opponents. However, Caesar immediately proceeded to ignore his colleague, assuming all power and taking measures unilaterally that were aimed at currying favor with the people. This made Caesar one of the main power brokers in Rome. With Caesar in power, the secret alliance of the triumvirate would serve the three men to circumvent constitutional obstacles and force their political objectives through their respective influence. Supporting each other, this is why Caesar's first decisions as consul would be linked to returning favors to Crassus and Pompey. Using brutal intimidation methods against members of the Senate, Caesar ensured the passage of the agrarian law, which helped relocate Pompey's veterans, and tax cuts for Crassus. The triumvirate became extremely powerful, to the point of being able to get anything they proposed approved by the Senate with little or no debate. Caesar would quickly accumulate gigantic wealth thanks to his participation in many of Crassus's businesses, which would place him in the highest echelons of Roman society. However, the early success of the alliance provoked a substantial political backlash. Political alliances in Rome were reorganized to counteract the three men during the following years. In that same year, Caesar married a Roman noblewoman, Calpurnia, daughter of Lucius Calpurnius Piso Caesoninus, a prominent member of the Senate. This was part of the marriage policy of the first triumvirate. Julius Caesar used the consulship purely for his own personal ambition. Those who opposed him faced the violent retribution of his supporters. Their aristocratic anxieties and the monstrosity of Caesar's nature were hidden behind his cheerful and friendly character. Caesar completely ignored the traditions, the decorum, and the subtleties of getting along with his fellow politicians. And with this political office came a great military command. During his consular period, Caesar took the Roman Empire beyond the limits of the inhabited world. He conquered more foreign peoples than any other general up to that time. Caesar's next dilemma was that the instant he left the consulship at the end of his term, his enemies would sue him for illegal activities during the period in which he had held the office. If Caesar could immediately occupy another government position, he would remain safe for a while. When his controversial year as consul ended, with the help of Pompey and Crassus, Caesar made arrangements to obtain a proconsular command and a 5-year governorship. In the year 59 BC, his powerful political allies helped Caesar secure the position for 5 years. As governor of Illyricum in the Balkans, proconsul of Cisalpine Gaul and Transalpine Gaul in northern Italy, and then of Transalpine Gaul, south of present-day France. This appointment came accompanied by a modest allocation of 4 legions. At that time, few could have guessed that Caesar's modest command, a seemingly sleepy backwater, would end up involved in a decade of constant war on a colossal scale, which would give Caesar the reputation of being one of the greatest generals in all of history, an outstanding general with acute strategic and tactical skills, as well as an inspiring leader. Starting in the year 58 BC, Caesar would face the main challenge of his life, the conquest of Gaul. It would be the contest that would elevate Caesar, the one that would allow him to achieve everything he had ever desired. From this crucial event in the history of Rome, he would finally become the most admired and feared character among the Romans. His success would generate the rejection of the Roman elite towards his figure, being eventually declared an enemy of the Republic, which would motivate Caesar to march towards Rome with his legions, cross the Rubicon, and thus unleash the second civil war in the history of the Roman Republic. This event would allow Caesar to achieve his definitive rise to absolute power as a Roman dictator. Furthermore, he would be involved in the civil war of the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt for the possession of the pharaonic throne, after the confrontation between Cleopatra VII and Ptolemy XIII. Finally, on the Ides of March of 44 BC, he would be the victim of the most famous assassination in history, which would mark the death of the Republic and would give rise in Rome to a political system in which tyrannical emperors would rule with absolute authority. And we will explore all this thrilling stage of Roman history in the next episode of our mini-series about Rome, the second and final part of the documentary about the history of Gaius Julius Caesar, a figure whose name, 2,000 years later, continues to resonate in every corner of the planet, becoming synonymous with greatness and visionary leadership. Without a doubt, he was one of the truly epic personalities of history. His writings, his speeches, endure over time and still continue to teach us valuable lessons. Thank you, friends, for joining us up to here. We will continue publishing new episodes of our mini-series about Rome, in which we will delve into the rise of the Roman Empire, its peak, its subsequent subdivision, and its end. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, share our content on social media, and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss our upcoming episodes. The comments you leave us help us immensely to keep improving. In addition, all these actions on your part generate signals to the platform algorithm and allow our content to be promoted, reaching many more people.